Hello, welcome to another TeamSense Tuesday webinar. My name is Caroline Rizzo, and I am so excited to have Sarah Ervin, our Senior Customer Success Manager, joining us today. Welcome, Sarah.
Thank you so much. It's great to be here.
So today we're talking about a really exciting and sometimes quite stressful topic, how to effectively manage employee no-call, no-show. Usually when we say the term no-call, no-show, it does give a little bit of a heart flutter to our HR managers, which is understandable. But today we're going to talk about some tactics really to help have conversations around no-call, no-show, really taking a look at your policies and then really how to address it and then prevent it. Before we get started, let's cover a few housekeeping items. As always, questions are encouraged throughout the webinar. We ask that you place them in the Q&A panel at the bottom of your screen. We will do our best to get to all the questions, but we will be saving them for the end. So we will do our best to get through all the content that we have. That's really great. But of course, as questions pop up, feel free to ask them. We love questions. You also may have noticed that we are recording the webinar today. So if you have to hop early or you want to come visit the content at a later date, no problem. We will email out the recording via a YouTube link. But of course, you can always visit us at teamsense.com/webinar to always revisit previous content or look forward to what we have coming up in the next week. All right, so without further ado, let's introduce ourselves. So you may have heard me mention, my name is Caroline Rizzo. I am the marketing manager here at TeamSense. But what am I doing here with these webinars? Really, my goal is to talk with people about interesting topics, with frankly, people that know way more about the topic than I do. So I ask all the burning questions, and that's why I'm so glad to have Sarah here with me today, who works with an extensive database of customers that we work with in manufacturing and logistics. So she sees no call, no show. She understands the pain points. So that's why I'm excited to have you here today, Sarah. So feel free to introduce yourself.
Yeah, hey everybody, I'm Sarah. I work with a lot of different customers, like Caroline mentioned. I support implementation, rollout, and really, most importantly, strategic partnership in an ongoing way. So I hear all sorts of stories from the land of HR. So we see some of our most hardworking, stressed, and honestly caring folks that I've worked with on our HR teams. So it's fun hearing those stories and then getting to come here and help distill some of that and hopefully create some resource sharing.
Yeah, I love it. And I always like to make this joke, but it's actually not a joke. It's real that I feel like Sarah is our HR therapist. She is so great to work with. And we always have raving reviews and people that so appreciate your help. So thank you so much, Sarah, from me and our customers. We really appreciate you. Okay, let's jump in. We have a lot to cover today, and I really want to set the stage early on. Let's talk about what no call, no show is versus job abandonment. So most people may have this feeling when a no call, no show happens that, oh gosh, this is job abandonment. What's happening? Can you just talk a little bit about the difference between the two?
Yeah, sure. So when we refer to a no call, no show, we're talking about a situation where someone has not appeared for a scheduled shift with no prior notice, explanation, or outreach of any kind. Now, that could be a precursor to job abandonment, but when we describe job abandonment, we're talking about a continuation of no showing or prolonged absence, um, and really no indication that that person even intends to come back.
Right.
So certainly some similarities, but with a no call, no show, we still have some opportunity. We still have some wiggle room. We don't have to yet call it job abandonment.
Yeah, exactly. Let's not call a spade yet until we have a little bit more information. Let's approach it with empathy. So, okay, thank you for clarifying. I think the other key point too is determining what is a valid no call, no show versus something that's clearly unacceptable. Let's go through each of these a little bit more in depth. I think the key that we've talked about is really drawing the line between the two, really making sure that you hold that line so that there is accountability between both. But let's talk through some examples of what's valid and not valid or unacceptable.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think an important note about no call, no show validity is we're not just saying like, what's an acceptable reason for being absent? We're saying what might be occurring that may have prevented that person from communicating. So that
Mhm.
could include things like true medical emergency, family emergency, a transportation issue that draws someone away from tools of communication or is too emergent or stressful to be able to communicate. And obviously emergencies like natural disaster, communication being down. Um, and honestly, when you see some of those things, it's probably not going to be one person. There's probably a systemic issue occurring. So you may see numerous no call no shows in those environments. When we talk about an unacceptable no call, no show, we're not saying this is an unacceptable reason to be absent. We're saying it seems like this person could have communicated. So, for example, a personal issue that may be important but isn't necessarily an emergency, a transportation issue that could have been planned for or didn't block that person from communication, and something like illness or discomfort where we're talking about you have a cold, you're not in the hospital. So, like, we're sorry you're out sick, take a sick day, but tell us you're not coming in, for
Yeah.
example.
Yeah, that would be great, right? Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And of course, I think it all comes down to communication and making communication as easy as possible for people to. And we'll clearly get into that and talk a little bit more about how TeamSense helps with that. But really, again, it's having the door open for transparency is obviously very key there. Okay, so I want to transition here onto something kind of cool that we did last week. So some of y'all may have seen this on LinkedIn, but our CEO and co-founder Sheila Stafford posted this question just ahead of our webinar to get a sense of a feeling of why people think no call, no shows happen in their organization. Of course, the question was, what do you believe is the primary reason? And the key things that we hit on was, do you think they are disengaged with the job? Do you feel like there's a disregard for consequences? Or is the call off process just frankly inconvenient? Or comment for other, of course, you can always, there's other reasons that pop up, but we had to keep it short because, you know, how LinkedIn surveys go. But it was interesting to see that most people did choose disengage with the job, and we will get into that a little bit more. But I do want to set the stage here in terms of giving you a sense for how we'll be talking about the rest of the webinar. So we will be covering each three of these categories in terms of how we help you with solutions to make sure that these things really are prevented, or you can actually do a little bit of course correction in your organization. So let's talk a little bit first about disregard for consequences. So obviously, a lot of people voted for disengagement with jobs, but you really have to start with the basics. The root of any disregard for consequences starts with making sure you do have a clear policy and you're able to establish consequences clearly, and really have a quick and reliable process for investigating and responding to these things. So let's first touch a little bit on creating a clear policy. We have a lot of very seasoned HR managers here that we all know you have some sort of policy in place. But what are just some considerations or reminders that we could literally just go through quickly? And Sarah, feel free to elaborate here real quick.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, you've probably heard us be a little bit of a broken record from previous webinars on this point, but saying clearly and repeatedly, like we are here, what you mean by the words you're using in your workplace. It may seem obvious internally, or if you've worked in HR for a long time, what we mean when we say no call, no show, but spell that out really clearly to employees, even including like what Caroline showed of specific examples of what a no call, no show may consist of and why that has an impact operationally and on someone's kind of own employment. Outlining the reporting process is also part of a clear policy because employees need to know what to do with that.
Mhm.
What exactly are their steps for quickly, easily, and clearly communicating to you that they're not going to be in? We hear about circumstances where, you know, an employee to report an absence, they have to like call a guard shack at a certain time, and then that message has to be walked across campus to their own manager. So employees are sometimes experiencing, for example, attempting to report an absence with an unclear process, maybe even being logged as a no call, no show when they were in fact trying to report. So making sure that employees have clear and understandable process so that they trust the policy. Um, Legal considerations, like always get that legal review. Make sure in particular that any attendance policy is in compliance with disability support standards, FMLA standards, all the other things that you certainly care about already. Let's make sure that this aligns well with that you're in good standing with your legal team, and that you're supporting any population of employees with the policy. And then finally, you got to communicate it. I think we've all worked at a place where there's a great policy somewhere in a handbook that maybe we don't have access to, or we heard about it once during onboarding. So making sure that this is announced clearly and repeatedly in multiple learning environments. So that might mean verbal announcement as well as in the handbook, and maybe a visual announcement. Are there resources posted around your space? Do you have defined communication and engagement streams? And then finally, making sure that this doesn't exist in a vacuum. How does the policy dovetail well with all of the other standards and procedures that you're setting? And is it cross-referenced? When an employee looks at your overall attendance policy, are they going to see how no call, no show fits right in with that clearly?
Right. Yeah, I think obviously that's important. We last week talked in our webinar with Allison, who is so great in explaining our product and how it works with our customers. We talked a lot about the use of Portal and
Mhm.
how you can use Portal as a place that's a source of truth for employees to self-serve and go to. So instead of getting a million questions a week, where's the attendance policy? Where's the employee handbook?
Yeah.
Hey, just text Portal and boom, it's right there. You can find it and always refer to it. So I think getting people in a place where they can self-serve is so important for HR managers to free up their time. So that's great. So thank you for clarifying that. Again, I know that we have lots of veteran HR managers here that this may be like, okay, duh, right? But it is clear and it's imperative for us to always consider it. So another fun one, establishing consequences and setting expectations. Obviously this feels like it has a negative connotation, but again, it's really setting boundaries. I think that's a better way to frame it. But let's talk a little bit about that and your experience with what you've seen and some considerations that you think HR managers should really think about.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we can start with like people and communities always crave clarity, right? So
Yeah.
what we're going for here is not being punitive. We're going for having established community agreements. So when we say progressive discipline, we're saying, is there a clear if then that the employee can follow? If you saw our points webinar, we talked about progression of disciplinary action around attendance quite a bit there as well. But for example, does an employee understand that first they might get a verbal warning if there is a no call, no show or other attendance infraction, followed perhaps by a written warning? And eventually that could go to termination. The employee needs to know exactly when that will occur and what it'll look like, both for your community trust and support, and also those legal requirements, making sure you have your audit trail, making sure that all of this is well documented and clear. And we need to have our established rules. So I won't say know when we might break them, but know what our edge cases are, right? There is
Mhm.
always going to be a time when we as people see an exception that we need to address with maybe a little slowdown, maybe just a little human interest and curiosity. So there may be exceptions to your policy around certain types of emergencies, situations where an employee truly can't notify you. Some of the valid reasons we looked at previously, maybe write those down. Maybe make it really clear to employees like, hey, we're people too. We know that there may be a day where you have a family emergency, God forbid, but should that occur and we can make contact with you later, you're not about to receive a termination, right?
Yeah,
That fits
yeah.
really well in with documentation requirements, which is just asking, in what circumstances would we expect employees in a timely way to produce on paper evidence of something occurring? Whether that's
Mm.
medical documentation, for example, and do they have a clear way to submit that? So that goes back to kind of the communication and policy. What happens next? We don't want a stressed out employee who has experienced a medical situation to be like wandering around with their paperwork, not quite sure where to go. So make that very, very clear. And then lastly, an easy appeal process. So if an employee, for example, was errantly attributed with a no call, no show when they tried to report an absence, where do they go from there? Kind of like you were referencing with Portal, Caroline. If an
Mhm.
employee has to reach out directly to an HR manager 3 times in a week to understand what the next step is or where resources live, it's unnecessarily stressful for both the leader and the employee. So having them know where to go and where to report is going to be critical. And then lastly, having an internal cadence where you're coming back to this process, making sure it still represents the community engagement stream that you want to have, taking any updates you need to, and then starting that clear communication and socializing again.
Yeah, I love that. You and I both are community nerds. We love talking
Mhm.
about community. And I think the key is leading with empathy, like you said. Again, we're all human beings. We're here. It obviously is important to set boundaries. I think it just allows for mutual respect and then again, transparency. Having that transparency back and forth and really giving that ability to both supervisor and employee is so important because it allows for more open communication. You're more willing to communicate something if you understand the boundary, you understand the policy, and you know that, it is important to communicate. So I think that's obviously an important point to touch on too. So thanks for jumping into that. I want to keep going through a little bit further along this line of kind of discussion. So another big thing we talk about is investigating and responding to no call, no show. So the tricky part for HR managers is that no call, no show happens in a very unexpected way, usually at a shift start. And so having any sort of investigation response procedure is so important for you to be able to just jump in and immediately go, right? Because these are things that are happening in moments of time. You're now trying to figure out how you're going to schedule out the rest of your day and fill the empty position. And so, again, let's talk a little bit more about what those procedures can look like and then the follow through on that too.
Yeah, absolutely. So first off, I love this first one we have here because it's not just the employees that need clarity on next steps and to know what their process is. The direct manager, supervisor, or kind of first person on point in this situation needs to know what their first step of response is. So, what do you expect from a manager, line supervisor, um, HR rep, whoever is going to be first to notice and take action when an employee isn't there? That could simply be documenting the absence and checking to see whether the employee did communicate in any way. But we need to quickly and efficiently initiate that without several different people having to pause and wonder who's going to do the thing. So having clear internal facing immediate process and triggering that action as quickly as possible. After initial documentation, typically the first step is going to be just to try to outreach. Like there's a lot of reasons why someone might not show up. And we know we've referenced a lot of emergency scenarios, but most of the time someone may have overslept or they forgot to call or they got their schedule wrong or they were just being kind of thoughtless and thought you wouldn't notice, whatever it may be. That give them a quick phone call, an email, whatever your established communication flow is. So ideally, again, this is just the documented second step is outreach. Finally, you tried to call them, didn't get anywhere. It may be really great to quickly check now if there's a pattern occurring. So when we start to talk about job abandonment risk, if you look and you're like, wow, Caroline has been showing up every day to work and now we can't get a hold of her, like something must be going on. Like, let's take a quick look at her history. You may see she's truly been here every day. You may look back at an employee's history though and say, okay, this is the fifth time in the last 3 months they've no call, no showed.
Yeah.
So something's up here, something's not working. They may be building towards job abandonment. They may not be engaged in the way we need them to be. This is where we can identify the pattern.
Mhm. Yep.
If there is no pattern and we can't contact the employee, it is really important to consider whether there is an emergency occurring or something going on for the employee that, whether or not it's an emergency, like something's not going right or well for them. It's a great place to start with an assumption of best intent. If we don't have any other data, let's at least behave as if there may be something critical occurring for that person. So gathering critical information, making sure you have context for the absence, making sure we are starting from a place of emergency awareness, making sure we know exactly how we will treat that employee if it is an emergency. For example, getting them employee resource support information quickly. And lastly, documenting all those steps. Because from here, if we don't hear from them and we've done all of our best documentation and communication, we're probably moving into those progressive discipline steps. So everything we're doing here is making sure that we have appropriately investigated, documented, and taken the steps that we've already agreed we take prior to starting warnings, write-up, and potential termination flow.
Absolutely. I think these are a good habit forming. It can feel probably daunting to look at this and think, oh my gosh, I have to go through this whole process. But the more and more that you kind of internalize it and really ensure the fact that there is that documentation, because if there's any sort of dispute going forward, then you do have that paper trail. I think the key here is making the communication as easy as possible. So, what does that communication look like, right? Could it be sending them a text message? Could it be, giving them an
Mhm.
actual phone call, right? I think a really interesting example we've seen of a real customer was the woman was broken down on the side of the road and wasn't able to come in. And so they were like, what's going on? So they were able to get in touch with her, and the manager actually got in his car and went and picked her up and
Yeah.
her in. And like, you see what I'm saying? It's like, wow, that's pretty, and that is from a empathy leading
Yeah.
example. Like that's a way that you are leading with empathy, and then obviously going the step further by picking up the employee, I think shows a lot of really great support. So
Yeah, and what trust building within that to see the employer show curiosity and then certainly have someone even get in a car to go to the roadside to help that person out.
right.
One other example here that comes to mind, Caroline, for communication and documentation here is we also had a company partner who set up a no call, no show investigation form. So if they identified that a employee had not come in for their shift, within a couple hours, they would proactively send a survey to that employee to say, hey, we noticed you weren't in today. Please quickly tell us why. Here's the next things that will happen. So, doing immediate documentation and restating the policy to that employee so they can quickly communicate if they did oversleep or something happened. And also, on your side, you can say, we resent the employee the policy. They understand that if they no call, no show again, that's going to be a write up or whatever the next step may be.
Yeah, that is so turnkey. That makes it so much easier as well. It's like, okay, immediately, like, boom, you can just turn right to that real quick and have that really quick reaction. So I love that example. Thank you for sharing that. If you're a customer, listen in, you can do that yourself. So, okay, so the disciplinary actions, fun stuff to talk about.
I know.
But yeah, let's talk about a little bit in terms of these steps and what they look like, and really how that flow works with no call, no show.
Yeah, I know this is what we're trying to avoid with our immediate responses, right? But certainly, we have to be prepared for there to be a pattern of behavior. Um, our disciplinary actions here are designed to promote positive staffing, have clear and legal communication with employees, and again, reinforce that culture of engagement where we've all agreed that we know what is happening next if XYZ occurs. So first we have a first incident. I'm going to give you some examples here, but it's really all about you knowing at your own site what your steps are. So for example, at a first incident, if it's a first occurrence, you may issue a verbal warning and document the incident. That could be a sufficient first incident response.
Mhm.
Once you see a pattern, so either consecutive no call, no shows, or when you look back at that history and you see those 5 over the last 3 months or whatever, you real or hopefully 2, hopefully we catch it before that, but you notice the pattern. That's when we're escalating, right? Likely to a written warning. There are some companies that use suspension or quickly ramp up points assignment, depending on the severity and frequency of the no call, no show. And we'll sneak in again here, noticing extenuating circumstances. So if your investigation and if that initial write-up, so if the employee is like, oh crap, I'm getting written up, and they come back and say, hey, I know I've been kind of disengaged. Here's what's going on with my family. Is that part of your extenuating circumstance clause already? And is that something to investigate further with the employee?
Mhm.
Barring that, if we've moved through verbal warning, written warning, maybe points are ramping, maybe your additional escalations are ramping, whether or not you use a point system, it may be time to talk about termination. At that point, it should not be a surprise to the employee that that's the next step. And if they are repeatedly no call, no showing, we're probably getting into the circumstance where they are already trending towards job abandonment or high disengagement. So at that point, a termination could be the logical next step. Very lastly, especially in circumstances of termination, you need to have a very clearly defined and documented communication flow. So, what is the final outcome step of a disciplinary investigation like that? And ensuring that that process and communication is consistent. It probably consists of a personnel record documentation, multiple forms of outreach to the employee. Ideally, there's a real termination conversation occurring, but when someone's already no call, no showing, that may not be possible. So, making sure we're consistently hitting clear communication routes for anyone reaching that point, and that you've documented all of the ways that you reached out.
Yeah, documentation. Again, we keep getting back to that point. In terms of, making that termination step, do you feel like there are circumstances where HR managers are considering the fact that, hey, this person is continuously no call, no showing, it's really impacting the culture around the workforce, right? So if you have someone that is having these repeated instances, do you feel like there's a situation where, it's like one bad apple can poison the well, right? Like, have you seen that with HR managers that you've met with before in making those decisions?
Yeah, it can happen. I think one of the most interesting reports I saw within the last couple of years was a study where they found that one highly disengaged or destructive person on a team has an outsized impact. It does take only one person to really create some troubling work circumstances, whether that's a toxic environment or disregard for procedure. So it is important to take even one scenario like this seriously. Um, what I will also say is that when effective investigation is going on, I do think what we find most of the time is that there is something going on for that person that is not necessarily just blatant disregard, um, or maliciousness. That doesn't mean they won't be terminated, right? But it does mean we could find a way through this that isn't combative and can still have some empathy.
Yeah, absolutely. I totally agree with you. You always want to come from a position of there may be something underlying that I don't know is going on with this person. It's good to have that communication and again, leading from empathy. That's the theme of this webinar, every webinar that we host together. Okay, well, thanks for that. So obviously we talked a lot about creating these absence policies, having these things in place. Let's get into some of the nitty gritty around disengage with the job. So this was the top voted in Sheila's survey. Um, we could have an entire webinar on this topic, I feel like, but from a mile high view, let's discuss some tactics for proactively preventing no call, no show and ultimately, how to really cultivate a positive work environment. I think, again, like we've talked about, is that can be the stem of any sort of job disengagement. So what would you say are some really good considerations with preventing no call, no show? And of course, I'm outlining these, but love for you to elaborate.
Oh, I love elaborating. I'll try not to go too far off into the weeds. So like we've talked about a ton, um, clear and regular communication here doesn't just mean clear and regular communication about attendance policy. This means how and when are we creating a culture of trust engagement with employees around everything? When we feel seen and when we feel consistency, we are more likely to engage. And part of that is community buy-in. Part of it is also accountability. If we are hearing and seeing that our employer is also engaged, then we know that there are open eyes around us. So this has kind of a many birds, one stone approach, keeping communication engagement high. Um, Certainly easy reporting systems. If it's difficult to be in communication, if there's multiple steps or lack of clarity, there's going to be a drop off. We see that even in just like basic UI research, right? If people have to click more than 3 places or something, they're probably not going to the next page of a website. That is true across any system. Clarity and ease in reporting. And certainly flexible scheduling options. So a really interesting thing to learn as you investigate no call, no shows more clearly is, are there people not coming in also because maybe there wasn't easy reporting, there wasn't a culture of engagement, and the schedule wasn't working for them and they weren't sure or maybe didn't proactively take a step to reschedule or figure that out. So making sure employees do have a path towards their schedule being something that works in their life, or a path for them to tell you that it doesn't.
Right. I love that. Yep.
Um, and then incentives, it doesn't all have to be punitive or disciplinary. We can also have great support for employees who are showing either great attendance or perfect attendance, or high performance in other ways. This can look like certainly bonuses. It can even look like swag drops, supportive messaging, really any way that you're telling an employee, hey, I noticed that you're doing exactly what we hoped you would. We hope this is working for you too, and here's a little incentive. Um, and then lastly, I'll just mention employee support programs. If we've identified through investigation or just through proactive employee communication that there are populations of employees dealing with difficult circumstances, what do we do with that next? It could be referral to another resource. It could be that there's internal programs. Um, it could be that, you have strong HR structure and managers that are creating some team support as well. But ideally, there's a next step. It's not just, oh, okay, we've learned that you're really struggling. There could be somewhere to go with that, ideally built into, um, an EAP or any kind of clear employee support lines.
Yeah, I like one example that was brought up with the customer is they realized that there is people struggling with just actually physically getting to work and the transportation that they needed. So they
Mhm.
created a carpool program.
Yeah.
Um, so that shows A, that you listened, and then B, you're really engaging with your employees to make a difference in how they get to work and really supporting them in those efforts, I think is really brilliant, frankly, on the customer side. So yeah, I think all of these are great. I think again, coming from a proactive standpoint is huge here. And I think that's something that HR managers have to balance. That's a huge balance for them is not only are they having to manage things when no call, no show happens, or you have a disruptive employee and they're harming the environment, but
Mhm.
also thinking about what are ways to encourage positive behaviors. Like it's constantly thinking through proactive measures, reactive, proactive, reactive. So I think
Yeah,
having balance is difficult, but it is important. And hats off to all the HR managers out there.
I
Y'all have
know.
a
Yeah,
job.
seriously. Caroline, that did make me think of one other thing I wanted to mention, which is we've been talking a lot about support and empathy towards employees, which is super important. And also want to acknowledge how stressful and demoralizing and unsupported these experiences can be for HR managers and leaders. These are the kind of scenarios where you can end up potentially repeatedly interacting with a escalated employee, dealing with some of the most kind of difficult personnel situations we see. So if you are the director in your department or see some of that stress firsthand, I would really also recommend proactively thinking about how we provide internal support to the HR team, right? Because it can be really thankless. So I would absolutely recommend also working in incentives and clear support programs for your support staff.
Yeah, I love that. Absolutely. We love you, HR managers. We are here for you. We want to see you do well and we want to support you in any way we can. And so I think even just getting people together to have those conversations is key. That's something that we'll be doing in future webinars is how do we get some HR managers together to actually talk through some of these challenges together. So stay tuned. But yes, thanks for bringing that up, Sarah. I appreciate it. Okay, so one thing that we talked a lot about kind of already, we've already hit on this because again, it's something that you and I are both passionate about, but in terms of cultivating a positive work environment, I think these are just, again, some interesting points to hit, a little bit repetitive of what we've been talking about, but again, expand your favorite thing to do, touch on this.
Ah, I can always expand. And yeah, I'll stay a little bit high level on these because I know we've done a good job of sprinkling it throughout. But I think it's great to reinforce. Everything we've been discussing today is aimed at a culture of responsibility. So when we really drill down on are we giving employees clear steps? Are we giving them clear support? I know that when you are already working your butt off as an HR leader, it can feel sometimes like, can't they just follow the policy? I have to do all these things. So I want to reinforce that when we create this world in which there is clarity, process, and employees feel empathy through clarity and process, um, the ultimate outcome is that culture where overall there will be more responsibility of behavior is what we're going for, right? Um, so all that to say, an outcome here should be adherence to policies in additional to the beautiful like people soft skills that Caroline and I both really prioritize as well. Building trust and open communication. Like we've said, communicate with employees about and beyond attendance policy, maybe more than you think you need to. Consistency is huge. We've talked about, I think in our last webinar together, Caroline, we talked about consistency a lot.
Yeah.
Um, Making sure that your managers are clear and empowered about policy enforcement across teams. We can't have our eyes as leaders. We can't have our hands on every single process here, right? So that documentation and clarity across our own internal leadership teams at every level within the organization is going to be really important. And having that documentation to review later so that we can provide some support and audit is going to be really important. And also being humble and open, get that feedback, learn how we can do it even better. The first time we take a stab at, a clear, built out, potentially progressive and disciplinary policy here, we'll probably hit some of it at 100. We're going to hit some of it at 70. So we'll keep working on that, and having open lines of communication with managers, employees to learn is just going to keep reinforcing the trust and responsibility. And lastly, we talked about this just a little bit with consistent policy, but actually training supervisors consistently is important. And it probably more frequently than you think you may need to if you're having a lot of team turnover. We'll need to keep reinforcing. And that, again, it doesn't have to be super lengthy, doesn't have to feel super disciplinary for supervisors, but quick policy reminders through ideally quick live trainings and review, but also making sure supervisors know clearly where their resources are, whether that's in the portal, whether it's posted in supervisor break rooms, all the same skill sets you give to employees, bringing that to supervisors as well.
Yeah, I love that. It's creating a fair environment, a fair playing field for everybody, supervisors, employees, all the mix. I think that one interesting point that we had a customer bring up is, for example, some of the supervisors will be promoted up from within the organization. So a lot of them will have been working with their peers
Mm,
and then they become a supervisor. So it can be hard to say, oh, so and so texted me that they can't come in or something's happening.
right.
And that's my friend, and so how do you create a sense of
Mm,
that's, I think, part of, again, regular supervisor training of really making sure, hey, we're all on the same page with this policy, because yes, we can be friends with people, but at the same time, it's way more important for the culture of our organization to establish that level of fairness. So totally love all the points that
mm,
you expanded upon. And again, love the culture of responsibility, trust, and human empathy, as we always like to say. So thanks for that. So our third vein of source of call-offs that we asked about in the survey, inconvenient call-off process, right? So the point that we like to make here at TeamSense is the fact that a reliable call-off system minimizes no call, no show. Can you explain just a little bit more about that, what it means in terms of how a call-off system can really help reduce any sort of no call, no show, how it can also reduce absenteeism? Would love just a little bit of a high-level perspective on that.
yeah, absolutely. When we say easy call off process, we're really saying easy to get the information, right? Like we want it to be easy for employees, but we're also saying, like, as a leadership team, as an HR team, how hard is it on us to get the data that we need to operate our company? So
Mhm.
when employees have a clear and efficient pathway to report a call off, especially in a timely way. So a system like TeamSense where there can be instant notification to managers and to HR, um, means that not only does the employee have the quick feedback loop of, great, I know I've reported it, I can trust that, I can put my phone away. But as a leadership team, you can also say, great, we immediately have the information we need. We don't have to question or wait for a voicemail line to be checked. We don't have to wait for 5 hours in the day to plan for staffing for the next day. We're just good to go.
Yeah, no, I love that. I think an example that I heard was somebody had met with their employee who was trying to protest a absence, and
Mm,
they were like, well, I called in and I called the actual CEO of the company and left a
mm,
voicemail. And so it's like, okay, what are we supposed to do with this information? But they said, with TeamSense, it's great because
mhm,
it's all there. It's all documented. I
mhm,
can clearly see, this is the way that the person did actually report an absence. Like you said, you can easily send out a form if there's a no call, no show. So that helps make the reactive standpoint a lot faster for any sort of employees. So again, it just creates a more centralized place for communication. And so I think that's a huge part of really making it way more efficient for HR managers to quickly access information and reach out to employees individually.
mhm,
We said another example too was talking about how, if you want to reward an employee for good attendance, you can actually reach out to them individually as well through your text message and really kind of document that communication too. So again, having that log critical, and then easy communication, both between supervisor and HR manager,
Mhm.
supervisor employee is critical. So great. Anyway, I wanted to just hit home. We're almost out of time here, so I want to make sure we get to our Q&A section. But what we'd love to talk about are different topics that resonate with our HR managers. Obviously, no call, no show is a huge one. So we do have a really great resource on our blog that will actually really drill down in a lot of depth each of the topics that Sarah and I talked about today. So if you want to go to teamsense.com/blog, this is a great way to see this. We will also email out a link to this blog so that you can review it with the recording of the webinar. So be kind of fun to listen to the webinar and then read the blog while you're also listening, so you can kind of follow along. But this will be a really great resource, and it actually also includes an example policy in case you want to take a look at it, compare it with your own policy, or maybe, I don't know, make some updates to yours if you feel like it's necessary. So I do want to get into the Q&A section, obviously. Before we do that, I do want to show a little bit of preview for next week's webinar. I'm super excited about it. So one of our customers, Alex Walker from Qualitrol, will be joining us. We'll be talking a lot more about how they have really streamlined their call-off process. Their goal is mainly to improve their employee communication. So I'm excited to learn more from Alex next week. Rob, our head of sales, will be hosting. So join us next week. You can register. We'll be sending out all the information via email as well. So without further ado, let's head back into our Q&A section. So question for you, Sarah, that came up. I'm seeing them coming in, and feel free if y'all have more questions, pop them in. We'll be answering them in real time. This first question that came in, so how often do you recommend revisiting supervisor training?
Mm. Revisiting supervisor training, I've seen cadences that I think have been highly successful have been quarterly or biannual. Now, what I will say is I can tell you company examples of regular manager training, but
Mhm.
the most important thing is just that you have internally had that conversation and set a cadence and can iterate on it. So I hesitate to say like, oh, it must be monthly or quarterly is best, right?
Yeah.
I think really what's best is just high intent and being able to tell your team the why.
Hmm.
So, for example, if you have a small team with low turnover, you probably don't need to do monthly training because it may be the same folks and your policy is less likely to change. So, if you're going to have a structured, like we have a supervisor town hall every 6 months, tell your team why that is. Tell your team why the cadence is occurring. If you have a high turnover, tons of supervisors coming and going, and you're doing a lot of onboarding training anyhow, you might be doing trainings on a monthly, if not weekly basis because of the volume. Again, just saying why that is and being intentional about the audience. In that case, it might not be a full town hall of supervisors. It might be smaller groups based on comings and goings.
Yeah, that makes a total sense. I think it's just evaluating for your organization. I think it's just good to obviously have that in your mind of like, okay, maybe we have a new crop of supervisors coming in, time to do some onboarding. And what's cool is you can really, with TeamSense, you're using Communicate, you can actually really streamline your onboarding process. So for example, if you have a new supervisor coming in, you can kind of schedule out those communications with their onboarding process, which I think is super cool. We talked about that last week, so I'm still thinking about it. But okay, hopefully that answers your question. One last question here, and we're just almost out of time. While we answer that question, I did want to just give a little bit of a shout out to how you can reach out to us. So again, feel free to contact us. I think the best way to really get a sense for how TeamSense works is scheduling a demo. Super easy. You just go to teamsense.com/demo, 30-minute demo, pick a time slot. You'll meet with an expert from our organization. So, and of course, we always love to see you at our webinars weekly on Tuesdays. So again, join us next week. Okay, so this last question came in. And this is a good one. We do get this question sometimes. Does making call-offs easier actually increase absences?
Yeah, I do hear that from time to time as well. And what we see is no, it doesn't increase absences. What we see with a clear, easy call off process If there is an absenteeism impact, we tend to see it actually go down because
Yeah.
there is the clarity, there's the culture of engagement. You're less likely to be hitting no call, no shows. And most importantly, if employees have clear visibility and accountability feedback about where they stand in their hours, they're more likely to follow it. So if an employee can see, like, oh, snap, I've used 90% of my PTO hours, and they have that information at the time they call off, they are less likely to take that action. So they if there is a non-emergent reason that they are calling off, they are more likely to see that and adjust behavior.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, I love that. Okay. Well, there you have it, folks. Making it easy for call off reduces absenteeism. So you heard it from Sarah, and she's a professional. Um, I love that. Well, we are at time. Sarah, thank you so much for joining me today. I always love learning from your brilliant mind, and thank you for sharing so many great stories. I know it's incredibly relatable to our HR managers that are here today. So thanks again for your expertise, and to everyone that joined us today, thank you for your time. Again, if you want to revisit the content, we will be emailing out the recording, and you can always go to teamsense.com/webinars. Okay, well, hope everyone has a great Tuesday. Thanks again, Sarah.
Thank you, Caroline. Appreciate your expert hosting.
Try my best. Okay, thanks everyone. Take care.